Welcome to the Computer Repair Podcast, episode number 263, Vet a Vendor. I'm your host, Jeff Hallish. This is our live call-in show for computer repair techs. We answer your questions on running and operating your computer repair business. Call-in number is 1-888-697-0162. The Computer Repair Podcast is brought to you by Repair Shopper, the all-in-one platform created specifically for computer repair businesses. Go to repairshopper.com and start your free trial today. Let me introduce the co-host. We have John Dubinsky from the Maven Group. How you doing, John?
Happy to be here, Jeff.
Happy to have you here, man. All right, so let's go ahead and start off with a tip or story that we could learn from.
I guess that's my key. I'll take the lead on this one.
You're the man.
Hey, I just got, believe it or not, a list of 4 or 5 things really quick, circling back to our previous 2 shows and just a couple quick tips. So 2 shows ago, you and I talked about the best and worst of what we thought was 2017. And to follow up on that, I read an interesting article on Dark Reading, which is a website. I'll put the link in the show notes and the chat, obviously. But I thought it was a great article about 17 things we should have learned in 2017, but probably didn't. So it's just a really good article for people to read.
Oh, very cool.
Totally tech focused and fits in with a lot for what we do with our business clients and that sort of thing. There's many articles that cover this, the Meltdown and Spectre issues with all the processor fun we've been doing. There's a ZDNet article and some other resources that you can look, but there is a problem where a lot of antiviruses aren't cooperating with the patches. So I'm going to post a link in the show notes and the chat as well so you can check if your antivirus product is good to go or not, or whether you might be having trouble with that. Last week's show, somebody asked about remote connections. And we forgot a really easy one that's really easy to use, and that is Chrome Remote Desktop. So I just wanted to circle back and throw that out there. That is absolutely free. Google has a brand new web interface for that product that came out and is in beta. So you might want to take a look at Chrome Remote Desktop if you're doing remote support. And that is both on-demand and installable access. And then last but not least on my little list is, I'm kind of the UVK fanboy from Carafred in the group, I guess. But don't forget, if you hit carafred.com and go to the download page, Fred, who is the caretaker of UVK and the other products, has a list of about 10 other great little software utilities that come in super handy all the time. So check out his website at Carifred, Carifred. And I'm sure somebody will correct me on the pronunciation of that as usual. And but that's really cool. He's got a great little bunch of utilities that are helpful there as well. And those are my tips of the week.
Awesome, man. All right, so number one, I want to put a shout out and a thank you to Ramey Bell from Avante Computers for sending me a gift card to Starbucks for sharing my keywords with him for his Google AdWord campaign.
That's nice.
Yeah, I thought that was really nice to go ahead and go above and beyond and just send me a little gift for helping him out. Even though I have, I will give that list away for absolutely free, and that is what I did. But it's nice to get a little pick-me-up with some Starbucks every once in a while.
Literally and physically.
Absolutely. And let's see. So the second tip is basically we have, I'm going to say this is a brand new year, being 2018. So what I'm going to say is that if people want to come on the show and share their information and be a part of the roundtable, we would love to have you. The only thing you need to do is you can do a couple of things. You can either send an email to guest@podnuts.com and get added that way, or you can send an email to podnuts@podnuts.com and we can get you on the show. So just want to give a heads up for the beginning of the year. I try to remind people all the time that we try to interact with computer repair businesses and technicians all the time. And that's why we're here. And speaking of,
idea. New blood would be great.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Uh-oh.
And speaking of, we have Chris Crothers, who is joining us. How you doing, Chris?
I'm always late, but never tardy. How do I sound?
You sound great.
I fixed the mic. Okay, we're doing good today. This is good.
So, Chris, why don't you go ahead and tell us maybe a tip or story that you have?
Always plan ahead. And if your client is going to be 30 minutes late for your on-site appointment, reschedule it. Does that sound like a pretty good tip? Yeah.
Sounds like a really good tip, actually.
I think that a server deployment, though, in an hour and 15 minutes is pretty good.
That's real good.
Yeah.
Wow. Very good. Well, it's nice to see that you're here with your beard in full. So
That's right.
Looking good there.
I've been growing it for you, Jeff.
You don't do that. All right. Let's go ahead and we're going to take a quick break and we'll get into our main topic. Our show today is brought to you by Repair Shopper, the all-in-one platform created specifically for computer repair businesses. It was developed by Troy Anderson, who owned his own computer repair and MSP business for 10 years, which prompted him to create Repair Shopper. There you go. If you need to do something, do it yourself, and then turn around and give it away to others. He found himself using multiple tools day to day just to be able to run his business and realized it was taking time away from doing what he loved most, serving his customers, which is exactly right. That's the part of the business that I love, is serving customers. I don't want to deal with the paperwork. And when you're doing manual paperwork and you have nothing to track anything, it is a bummer. So this is definitely the way to go. We love Repair Shopper because it contains all the essentials: point of sale, customer relationship management, ticketing, integrated invoices, estimates, and payments, plus powerful extras like built-in marketing and reporting tools. It is truly the most complete computer repair business solution available. It's also fully customizable to fit your shop's workflow and integrates with a variety of tools like QuickBooks, for those that use QuickBooks, Slack, and Kabuto, to name a few. Their support team is great and will give you a full walkthrough of the system when you create an account. Check them out at repairshopper.com, and that is REPAIRSHOPR. There's no E in there, and there's only one P. There you can sign up for a free trial and take it for a spin, see if it's going to work for you. But ever since I've been using it for the last couple of years, I love it. It makes my business so easy to do. All right, so let's go into our main topic. The main topic today is we're going to talk about the process that we use for vetting our vendors. In other words, how do we vet a distributor or vendor that we're going to use in our own businesses? Because obviously there's new things coming out all the time and it's hard to keep up with the industry. There's a lot of people out there that we know of, and there's a lot of people out there that we don't know of. But what is our process that we go through to figure out if this is going to be a good fit for our business? Because they might be the greatest thing since sliced bread, but maybe they don't fit your business model. And because of that, you want to make sure that you're not wasting a lot of time and effort. Now, I'm all for kicking the tires, trying things out, but there comes a point where you don't want to spend a whole lot of time figuring stuff out. You want to get in there, ask the questions that you need to ask, get the information you need to get, and make an informed decision. So, John, I'm going to kick this over to you. And what is some of the things that you do when you are vetting a vendor?
I totally base my entire decision on the type of swag they give me for free. No, actually, I take that back. This was a great question. You posted this to me earlier this week, and the more I started to thinking about it, the longer my list got. So not in any particular order, I'll run through these, and maybe that'll start some conversation. The first thing that really came to my mind is, if it's going to be a vendor you deal with a lot, I mean, do you like them? Do they have a team that you like to work with? Is your sales rep somebody you want to work with? Is their support staff somebody you want to work with? Do you have a relationship with them? The other obvious thing you can do is maybe check Google, LinkedIn, Facebook, see what they're posting and see what others are posting about them. Obviously, you can always reach out to our community and see if any of the other Podnuts guys or gals are using that product or had experience with that vendor or their equipment. One of the things that's come up on the show before is maybe check out how their processes work. A good example of that would be, how is their RMA process? Do you have to call them, go through an hour-long phone call in order to get a replacement equipment? What's the turnaround time? How does that affect what you're doing? And or can you make their process work for you, or are they willing to change it for you? And as we get more and more into cloud-based vendors, I would suggest that we always want to take a look at maybe the vendor's financial health. Are they going to be around? If you make a big investment, put all your eggs in their basket, and I would suggest you like an RMM vendor is a good thing to look at. You make a huge investment in that, all of a sudden they're not next month. They're next month. That means you're going to have to do a lot of work and probably make another investment. How does their physical location affect you? Shipping time, delivery time, service time. I got more. Chris, you want to jump in? You got any that I haven't touched? I feel like I'm babbling on.
No. I mean, I hate when I agree with you, because then it leaves so little for me to say.
Oh, come on. We can be friends.
But for now. But a lot of what I wind up looking for on top of all of that is, how hands-on and how hands-off are they going to be with me? Like HP and Lenovo are really good examples, because if I have a system that's under warranty, it's easy for me to just put in an RMA and have them ship me the part. I replace the part and ship it back, and we're all done, right? So those are really streamlined processes for me, and they don't wind up costing me additional time. Also,
Amen.
Also, how hands-on is your account manager going to be? You could have a fantastic support staff that you really get along with, but if you pick up the phone and try to call them and you can't get a hold of them, that's not really going to do you any good. Recently we just switched over all of our cell phones to a new vendor. Price was a part of it. Obviously, we're not going to switch to something that's going to cost us more without good reason. But the biggest thing for me was that they gave us a dedicated account manager for our account. And I tested that out before we even got the phones by calling them on a Sunday at dinner time. And it sounds really bad, and you might feel bad doing it. But the fact that at 6 o'clock in the evening, he picked up the phone on a Sunday to answer the questions that I had about something that I didn't even have yet made me feel really good about it. And we wound up with an issue. Our data got shut off. I was actually on a Sunday at about 2:00 p.m. Something weird happened during the port when they were porting one of the numbers, shut the data off of all of our cell phones and tablets. I called the guy on his cell phone Sunday at 2:00, and within 15 minutes, all of our data was turned on. And there's no way you'd be able to do that through just a tech support line where you're in queue with however many tech there's going to be on the other side of the phone, right? So, look for that vendor that wants to have that relationship with you, that wants to support your business. And when you find that, it's going to wind up giving you a lot more that you can offer to your clients as far as time and as far as reliability.
It's almost like we show prep together, because you knocked off about the next 4 items off of my list, and that was awesome. But yeah, how do they communicate? Are they willing to strategize and work with you? What kind of support do they, provide you? And does it fit with what you're doing? Meaning, do you want to see training, webinars, blogs, Facebooks? Are they already participating in the communities you deal with? So yeah, high five, Chris. Thanks.
Man, I wonder what would happen if we ever actually did have a strategy meeting before these shows.
Show note meeting? Yeah, that'd be interesting. Yeah. Jeff, make a note of that in 2018, maybe?
I got a note right here.
There you go.
So,
go ahead.
I was going to say, a lot of this stuff is really good. The stuff you guys are bringing out, and these are just things that a lot of times when we're looking at stuff like this, we don't take the time to think about it. We kind of are a lot of times in a reactionary mode where it's like, I need a notebook provider, or I need a backup provider. And we don't take the time to go, hold on, let me go ahead and vet somebody, instead of just figuring out, hey, I'm just going to use this and we're going to go with it. It took me a long time before I would actually start selling backup, because I didn't want to be responsible for it. Once I figured out that I could have a large enough backup vendor that was going to be responsible for things, then it felt more comfortable on my end providing that service for my customers.
Well, and I think there is, a root to that way of thinking, that reactionary thinking. And the root to that is that a lot of people that are in this business, and a lot of people that are listening to the show right now, are on their own, right? They don't have techs. They might have a bookkeeper or an accountant. You should have a bookkeeper and accountant, but they might have a bookkeeper and accountant that keeps their books for them, and they deal with tickets and calls and all of that. Most people don't have anybody answering the phone for them. Most people don't have other technicians working with them. So you wind up in this position where you constantly feel like you have to do everything yourself. And when you're looking at your vendors, you wind up looking at your vendors like, okay, now how am I going to run this part of my business? How am I going to do this on my own? And I think we really need to get out of that mindset. I was there too. I used to sell just Carbonite back in the day, and I didn't sell antivirus. I sent people to Amazon and collected the check, right? Because it was the only thing that I knew. And then I was introduced into the realm of account managers, and that just completely opened up the business and wound up not only making me a lot more money, but making my customers a lot happier.
That's good. John, you were going to say something?
Well, right along the lines of what you're saying is, don't be afraid to ask these vendors that you're going to deal with for NFR or not for resale piece of equipment. Either you can get those for free for a period of time or usually at a very deep discount. So if you want to try out a router device or a switch or something like that. So that, yeah, definitely. And the other thing I think a lot of us are really focused on, especially us one-man armies, is just getting a solution in place as fast as we can. And sometimes that'll burn you because you'll get in pretty deep and then find that one thing that you didn't realize that forces you to reevaluate your relationship totally and maybe go back and redo with a different product or service, what you've just spent time on doing already.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to be reactionary when it comes to this stuff. You want to be, be out ahead of it. And here's the other thing too. I think a lot of times, just like we want our business customers to basically have an IT budget that they're operating out of, a lot of times we need to have a budget in our businesses that's going to allow not only time, but money to be able to do these types of things where we're doing testing, where we're working with vendors and we're figuring out if what they have is going to work with us. A lot of times you're not going to know that. And you don't, like these guys are saying, you don't want to make that decision just off the cuff and go, hey, I just wasted 6 months and that was a bad decision that I made. Now, I'm not saying, again, there's a caveat to this. I'm not saying that you shouldn't just try things sometimes, because sometimes that's the way it works and that's okay. But again, it's about thinking ahead. Let's stop being firemen, firewomen, and going out and putting out fires all the time. Let's step back and go, what do we need to do to make my business better? And this is a great time of year to do this stuff. Always beginning of the year. New things are coming out. A lot of people launch things. Maybe you were able to take the last part of last year and test a couple things out and go, okay, when I get to January of 2018, now I'm going to implement this. I've got enough resources and enough time in it that I understand it, and now I can give it out to my customer.
And you can also go old school as well and maybe check out the Better Business Bureau or even a government watch list. There are links to both of those that I'll put in the show notes. So that's just an easy way to do a little search just to see if anybody else is complaining about what you're considering.
Oh, for sure. You should also know what your total cost of ownership is going to wind up being. Each and every person that's listening to this right now, if you're running a business, you need to know how much your time is worth, so that you know how much the cost of your time is going to be when you're figuring this out. If you're implementing a new system or testing a new system, you should be tracking that time so that you can figure out how much time, money you've spent into it, and whether or not it's going to wind up being worth it down the long run. If you're only just starting and you maybe have 50 computers that you're monitoring, it's not going to be nearly as big of an impact as if you have 1,000 computers that you're monitoring. If you're looking at switching it to an RMM system and saying, well, it's going to save me $5 a month. I get all this extra features. This is going to be fantastic. It's great. And it worked on these 10 computers. Well, that's great. But how much time and resources are you going to put in to implement this solution? And is it going to wind up being worth the cost in the end?
John.
Thanks there, Jeff.
You're welcome.
Along that same line, don't be afraid to ask the vendor for references. I mean, your customers vet you through references sometimes. So, ask your sales guy that you're dealing with or gal and say, hey, do you have somebody I can talk to that you work with now that's about my size, trying to do what I'm trying to do?
There's another thing too, is I've been looking at different services today and actually over the last couple of days. The other thing that I will do is once you go to, again, I'm going to say that gut is probably the number one rule for a lot of things. It works for me. If it works for me, it can work for you. If I go to a website and I see a bunch of big name things that Amazon, Microsoft, Google uses our services, whatever, I take all that stuff with a grain of salt. As a matter of fact, usually most of the time when they come out with these big names, I usually will go the other way because we don't know in what form or fashion that they're actually using that service. I don't know. So those are kind of the things that I look at when I'm looking at the website. Is it a bunch of fluff? Are you saying, hey, we're the best game in town? Come to us because we're doing things that nobody else is doing. Here's the thing. When you're looking at a lot of things out there, a lot of people are doing pretty much the same things. And they all have pros and cons. They will all have some things that are maybe better than another vendor, but vice versa. So you constantly are chasing this thing that doesn't exist, which is the magic, all-inclusive solution to your problem. Well, guess what? It doesn't exist. You need to adjust on the fly. And sometimes you need to, and this is why I say you need to use something that's going to work for you in how you do your business.
And I'll add on to that. One of the biggest things, especially today with the compliance industry, is make sure that the vendors you're dealing with either meet your compliance needs or those of your customers if they're going to be involved. And don't forget about, depending on the vendor you're dealing with and how you're interacting with them, you should make sure that they're insured to protect you and your customers as well.
That's good. Chris, you were going to say something?
Nodded.
Oh, you nodded.
I agreed with him. This sucks. We need an argument. Jeff, are you still tracking all this stuff on a spreadsheet?
This is a wonderful topic that you brought up, Chris, and I'm glad you brought it up. So I actually took the time at the end of this year because I had looked at things like QuickBooks and whatnot, and I'm not saying you shouldn't use them.
Okay.
Most of you probably should. But
Okay.
here's the thing. I made such a drop-dead gorgeous Excel spreadsheet, and I spread it out. It lays it out month per month. I used to have everything on one sheet. And I went back and looked at the original spreadsheet that I started with from 2010 and what I have now. And so it went through this growing process over the last 8 years. And it's just every time I open it up, I'm just, it's so beautiful.
So basically you're saying you can't let it go, is what you're saying.
Okay. It works for me right now.
Right.
With as much business as I do on a monthly basis, it works for me.
Okay, so here's my question to you, Jeff.
Yes.
Okay, because I think that this is about to be a very important lesson for everybody out there.
Okay.
What's your total cost of ownership for that spreadsheet?
Well, that depends. Listen, the reality is if I were to look at the time per hour, I mean, to me, one of the things like using something where you're using a CRM tool, right? Or a spreadsheet or QuickBooks or whatever, right? All these things are going to take time because here's the problem. There are a lot of companies out there that want to integrate everything in their systems, which is fantastic. The problem we run into is when something breaks, all of a sudden, it takes a lot of time to figure that stuff out. So if you look at the things that you're inputting, if you're inputting something into an Excel spreadsheet, you're doing the same thing in QuickBooks. There's really no difference. In the formulas,
as somebody that uses QuickBooks, that's not true. But I think you're avoiding the question though.
Well,
how much time did you? No, seriously, I'm not saying that this isn't a good solution for you or that it's not even worth it. What I'm asking is what's your total cost of ownership? How long did you spend using it? And the point that I want to get to is that you probably don't know.
Yes, actually I do. So
well, that's actually really surprising.
Well, here's the thing. So if you would ask the question in English, not Canadian-ish, then you would have understood what you were talking about.
Oh, okay. Oh, I'm sorry.
Total cost of ownership. Total cost of ownership.
Podcast in Sweden. So just let's all get along.
No, so it took me right around, I'm going to say probably a good solid 8 hours.
A good solid 8 hours. So, and you're a flat rate billing for some reason. So you're
that also depends too. Not everything's flat rate, but anyway.
So would you say that your time's worth about $75 an hour?
More than that, but yes, go ahead.
How much is your time worth?
Probably about at least $100 an hour.
Okay. So it only costs you $800 to implement this system, and even if you have the $99 a year Office 365 plan, right? It's an $800 implementation and $99 a year to keep it going, with maybe a couple of hours here and there to update it, right?
Which part?
The spreadsheet, right? Because you have to input all of your information, which is right. So that right there, that's the type of information that I would love to have people email in about their solutions they have now, because I would like to know what someone else's total cost of ownership is for Repair Shopper, for ConnectWise, for Name, Automate. What is that other one? Autotask. I'd love to see that type of information that we can share with people, so that we can turn around and say, look, this is kind of the trend. This is what everybody is seeing. Is this going to be worth it for you? Or do you just want to spend $800 on Jeff's spreadsheet?
Here's the thing. Now, I probably won't touch that spreadsheet for another 4 years.
Sure.
And so when you look at what you're trying to do, again, this is what works for my business, because I looked at to do something in QuickBooks, how long, in your professional opinion, does it take to actually learn the ins and outs of QuickBooks?
Okay. It depends.
Yep.
All right.
Here we go.
So look, the basic usage of QuickBooks, if you're just using QuickBooks, okay, then you can watch a YouTube video, and that YouTube video will show you, first off, there's a wizard that walks you through the initial setup, right? And then your accountant, because you should have an accountant, sets up the general ledger accounts, or fixes them after if you decided not to have an accountant when you set all this up, right? So far, if I were starting off brand new, I'd spend an hour looking at YouTube videos so that I can learn how to go through the walkthrough, how to create a customer, and how to create an invoice. Because really, for QuickBooks, those are the only 3 things that you want. Maybe if I got fancy, I'd spend an extra half hour to learn how to send a PayPal link within my QuickBooks emailed invoice so that people can pay by PayPal. So yeah, total cost of ownership is actually pretty low for QuickBooks. You're probably looking at $2,000-$3,000, depending on what your time is worth, including the cost of the software, including support, maintenance, all that stuff, right? Over a 5-year term.
Okay, so now, I'm sorry, you said what? $2,000 to $3,000
over a 5-year term? Yeah, so
okay.
less than $1,000 a year, which when most CRMs are, I mean, you're not tracking tickets in that though, right? So I mean, that's kind of where things go weird. Now, if you had, say, Repair Shopper, right? The only thing you're really learning about QuickBooks is how to put in the file in the first place. Your accountant sets all that up, right? Repair Shopper integrates with QuickBooks to the point where items that you create in Repair Shopper is synced to QuickBooks, customers that you create in there is synced, invoices, payments, all that stuff is synced. So really, the total cost of ownership for QuickBooks at that point is a lot lower, maybe $1,000. And then you need to look at the total cost of ownership of Repair Shopper. And I mean, I learned Repair Shopper probably quicker than some, because I already knew how to use QuickBooks. I'm a QuickBooks Pro advisor, so I knew how to make all those things work, right? So I can't really judge that one. But yeah, if you're using QuickBooks on its own and like doing Word documents for your tickets for some reason, you're probably only looking at about $2,000 over 5 years to deal with that.
So really, if you were really to, and here's the thing, a lot of times when we track things, we do a lot of estimates and tracking. Nobody actually takes a stopwatch or any type of program and actually tracks their time. So these are all estimates. And what I'm hearing from both sides is it sounds pretty much the same. It could go a little bit one way or the other, but the point you're making is there is a total cost of ownership in doing all this stuff, and you're absolutely right.
Right.
You have to figure out.
There's also a time savings after initial deployment.
True.
So like right now, we're going through deployment with ConnectWise. Deployment with ConnectWise, I'm going to tell you that the ownership cost is pretty high when you're getting it set up. There's a lot of training involved. There's a lot of setup involved. It's this software is a beast. But once you get to the point where it's all set up, all of a sudden, all of the time that you put into it winds up making your monthly maintenance of dealing with all of that so much lower than it would be otherwise. Tracking your total cost of ownership is really easy when you're using any kind of a ticketing system with a stopwatch, because you can create an internal ticket, use the stopwatch to figure out how long you actually wind up spending on it so that you can put that into your internal expenses. So that there are ways of dealing with all of this, but I guess that's kind of my point. It doesn't go beyond just what happens when you set it up. It goes what happens while you're using it, and how is it going to affect you in the long term.
Right. And so, when you look at the cost of a ticket for whatever it is, and let's go through it, we're kind of getting a little off subject, but let me just walk through the process so everybody kind of understands and can bring this home. Is basically you receive a computer. For me, I log in a repair shop. Actually, let me step back from that. You receive a computer, you hand the person that brought you the computer a sheet to fill out with their personal information, name, address, email, passwords on that particular computer. Flip it over, read and sign the back. Bring the computer in. We take that information from that signed document and I input it into Repair Shopper for the very first time when they're a first-time customer. Get all their information in there so they can get emails and updates and all that kind of stuff. Then I will go look at the computer, figure out what's wrong, figure out what it's going to cost, either communicate with them via email or call them directly and say, this is what it's going to cost. They say yes or no. We move forward, or they just pay a diagnostic fee. No harm, no foul. First time they're in the system, you don't have to go back, and you can create another ticket from inside the system once they're there. So the cost of ownership goes down over time.
Yes.
Then you take those things, if you order parts, et cetera, whatever, you put that stuff into a spreadsheet or QuickBooks or whatever, unless you have something that's integrated. And again, integrations for the most part, sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. So you're going to have that in there, because these things. Software to me is hard.
Sure.
It breaks absolutely all the time. And it's the nature of the beast. It can't keep up with the thousands of different variations of things that are out there.
Yeah.
So, but this is the process that we walk through to get this stuff. So when you look at cost per hour, what you're charging, and are you charging to do the paperwork? No, you're not doing that.
No, that's out of your own pocket.
Exactly. So
Absolutely.
that's what Chris is saying. That's part of the cost of ownership when it comes to that stuff. So
yes,
John, you said there was somebody was asking something from the chat room.
Rick had a great point in the chat. The question is, in his statement is, the question is, how much do you need to know, meaning the business owner? And it maybe is perhaps your accountant who really needs QuickBooks.
Okay.
Which is a fair statement, because obviously you want your accountant or CPA who is helping you to have all the information in order to be able to, depending on the relationship you have them, if they just do your taxes at the end of the year, or are they a business advisor? And perhaps all you're using QuickBooks for is to generate that time and billing through invoicing and ordering product through purchase orders or expenses, or however you're utilizing that. So maybe you don't do a whole lot of bookkeeping in QuickBooks, but you may have a team member or a vendor partner that is doing that for you.
And I will say that it's usually, if you're not going to use an accountant as a business advisor, which is a good idea if you're not good with numbers, then you should have something in front of you that you can pull reports from. And QuickBooks is a really good way to do that. If I start offering a service and I set a price for that service and I go for it, and in 6 months, I'm going to want to know whether or not that service is profitable or if I'm losing money on it. And I'm not going to know that unless I know how much money and time I'm spending into providing that service versus how much money I'm making off of it. So if you don't have
nobody says you should know your name, but your numbers and all that. But in the power of QuickBooks is you should be able to generate that without knowing how to do any accounting, just by simply doing some visual reporting and managing your business by eye. That's the power of using a tool versus creating a spreadsheet, entering all that, trying to figure out how to generate that by yourself.
Right. No, absolutely. I don't want to have to, create a macro to figure out how much something costs me to do through a spreadsheet, but I can open up QuickBooks and I can see fairly quickly, like within a couple of minutes. Okay, so this is how much money I made off of this. So it's and QuickBooks isn't the only tool out there that does that. There are plenty of tools out there. There are plenty of free and inexpensive cloud-based solutions that'll do the same thing. So you got to find something that works for you, I guess is where I'm going with that.
And I'm not, we like to twist the knife in Jeff's back every time I get a chance because old-fashioned Word 2003 spreadsheets. But let's be honest. I mean, if you're a part-time tech, you're doing this a couple hours a week. Do you need to make a big investment? Probably not. If you are an Excel pro, maybe your background's in Excel and you can make it do all the magic you want. Some guys use Craftsman tools. Some guys use Snap-on tools. Some guys go to, help me out, Kmart and buy whatever's there. And if they can get the job for you, that's fine. The idea is just to maximize the investment of whatever time you're putting into whatever you're doing to get the most out of it, reduce that expense time, increase your billable time, and move on and have a little fun, I think. So I'm going to say you should both take your corners, get a little water, and maybe we'll move on.
Oh, no, we're not done yet. We're not done yet. Hold on.
No. John broke up the fight.
So, Chris, let me ask you a question, because this is another thing that, see, here's where a lot of stuff gets left out. In what I'm trying to do is make sure that like Chris is doing and John is doing, make sure you have all the information to make the right decisions for you. Now, how long do you take to do your taxes at the end of the year? What is the total cost of ownership? Is that crappy term that you came up with?
I came up with that. I
didn't know
TCO,
Jeff.
So for me, it takes me about 7 minutes. I click file and then go to create accountant's copy, and then I send it to my accountant.
So you don't double check or go through anything, or you just kind of go, hey, everything's good.
I'm going to jump in there now. If your books are set up correctly, if your system is set up correctly, the idea, and obviously, garbage in, garbage out. Let's go back to computer basics. No matter whether you're using a 2003 spreadsheet in Notepad or QuickBooks Online, or whatever, the idea is the system should be able to provide you that information with very little effort, meaning you can compare last month's numbers to this month's numbers, last quarter's numbers, last year's numbers. You can see if all of a sudden some expense is way out of line. And that can be something as you typed in the wrong key, fat fingered something, or maybe all of a sudden you're discovering some credit card fraud, or maybe all of a sudden you sold 1,000 computers where last month you sold one. So, there's a lot of variables there, but the system is supposed to make that readily obvious and allow you to manage that by eye. That's the goal.
Right.
And if you're using any kind of an accounting platform that allows you to sync your banking and your credit card transactions into it so that you can confirm those transactions, that makes things actually pretty straightforward as well. Every time I spend money on something business related, it goes in as an expense. And then it matches that to the bank statement when the bank statement comes in at the end of the month. If there's something missing, oh, hey, I forgot to put that in. Let's grab that receipt. Let's get it done. Absolutely what John said. As long as you have your system set up properly and you're keeping some sort of an eye on it, it doesn't take that long. It's something that I just get done once a month, and it takes about 10 minutes, right? You pull up ConnectWise. Well, I was using something different before, but pull up ConnectWise and it says I made this much money this month, and then I pull up QuickBooks and it says I made this much money this month. Well, I know that's right then.
Okay. So very, very similar then, as far as, because my accountant, I don't know whether or not he uses QuickBooks. Doesn't really matter, because I get a workbook from him where it has last year's taxes in it, and all the line items. It takes me a total of probably about the same amount of time to write in the numbers from my Excel spreadsheet and send them off. So again, not everything is what it seems for people out there. And again, you're going to have to figure out how it is you want to do things, what it is, what's going to work best for you. And if you can, like these guys are saying, visually look at things to know exactly what you're spending, where your business is going, as long as you can do that by eye. And I'm all for that, because it's easy for me to look at my sheet and go, oh yeah. Now, I've improved on it over the years. When I first started, it was a horrendous mess, and there was probably a bigger cost of ownership when I first started that off versus using another service.
And let's be brass tacks a little bit too, Jeff. I'm going to pick on you if I can a little bit, since I have been already. But you're a one-man army. You're
Right.
part-time tech, no other employees. I mean,
Exactly.
you do all the ordering, you do all of the procurement, you do all the expensing, you do all the repair. So I don't want to say it's easy, because that's going to minimize what you do, but it's easy for you to keep that in your head.
Correct.
Versus having, now I'll pick on Chris. He's the business owner, a couple employees, who's ordering, who's answering the phones, who's servicing those tickets, who's doing the repair. So the complexity of your system needs to fit your situation as well. If you're a part-time tech, you may not need to invest in online accounting, CRM, ticketing, blah, blah, blah. Maybe you should, maybe you shouldn't, but then your need is also going to fit your solution as well.
And I think too, you need to figure out, if you want to try these things out, you absolutely can. And it's fairly easy to do. And you can figure out right away whether something's going to work for you or not. And again, to me, I mean, to say it's going to take a couple hours to set up software, I consider myself a fairly smart person. And there's a lot of time where I look at software and go, I don't know, because it's not making sense to my brain. Now, once I've been using it for a long time, all of a sudden I go, oh, okay, I don't know why this was so hard. So again, that is also going to vary from person to person. And there's probably a lot of intelligent people out there that just go, man, I don't want to deal with this. And that is sometimes the things that I look at and go, yeah, I'm not going to deal with that right now, because like John said, I don't really have the need for it. Now, if it comes down to the point where I need that, I absolutely will take that and transition over at some point.
I'm in 100% agreement with what Chris says. And I really, what I'm hearing Chris say is, if you're going to do this, you're going to own your own business, you should probably start out and do it right. I mean, if it's going to be a full-time business, I mean, you need to have accounting software, in my opinion, to get it totally right. You should have a CPA partner. You should have an insurance partner. And the reason that makes sense to me is because we're asking our customers to use us as a technical IT infrastructure partner. We're the pros. So you should use pros, but again, the tool is different for every business owner.
Yeah. And let's be honest too. You don't have to spend a whole lot of money to get a good accounting software. Like Wave Accounting, I used Wave Accounting when I first got started. It's free. They start adding in paid services like payroll. So they eventually get you when you're big enough. But there are options out there that you're not going to have to spend an arm and a leg to get yourself started if you don't want to do something like QuickBooks.
And I'll go back to what I started with way back in the day, and this was with a different business, not this business. And this is probably one of the no, actually it wasn't. It was actually Microsoft Money.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
And they had their own accounting platform. Actually, it was Microsoft Accounting is what they came out with for a short period of time, and I used it for a short period of time, and went,
yeah.
And now, to be fair, everyone I've looked at after that looks pretty much the same to me. There's not a whole lot of difference between most accounting software that I can see, not from the onset. So with that being said, I think that this is definitely a good subject, and definitely what we're talking about when we're talking about vetting vendors, and we went down this rabbit hole.
Sorry.
That's all right. It depends, and you need to fit it to your business. So, and I totally forgot where we were even at talking about vetting vendors. John?
Well, has anybody
you want me to help you out there?
Oh, there you
go. Give me 2 seconds to scroll back through the chat, because I'm trying to figure out who said it. Oh, Jeff H. That's not you, Jeff. Did you put that in there?
No, I didn't. That's not me.
Jeff H. in the chat brought up a great point when we were talking about our vendor partners. And he said he really liked the topic, but he said you could also reverse it and use it to take a look at yourself. Use the same way that you're vetting a vendor to vet your own company, and maybe make improvements based on that. So I thought that was some wise words.
Yeah, very good.
Has anybody had, other than John, a bad experience going with a new vendor and having it completely burn out on them? because they didn't realize something was going to happen. I've got two that I can think of without going back in my notes.
Well, go ahead.
You don't have any, Jeff?
Not really.
Not really?
No.
Okay. So I've had two, and the first one was an RMM. I don't know if we should use names, so I'm not going to go down that route.
All right.
I mean, I was, everything had to be white label. I had to be able to give my white label clients access to the RMM. When I switched over to this particular RMM platform, all of those things were supposed to be there, right up until I found out that no, that it wasn't going to work the way that that they said it was going to. And I was about a quarter of the way into deployment. Because I was doing my own clients first to make sure that nothing blew up before I started involving other people's clients. Went to do the first one for one of my white labels, found out that, hey, I can't create an account for him. And their response is, oh, yeah, no, they just use your login.
Oh,
okay.
So, well, that's not what we discussed 3 months ago. So thank you. I want my money back. Have a good day. And that was the end of that relationship. That was a big fire to put out, because I don't know if you guys have ever switched RMM platforms on your clients before, but it is a process. Never? No, that's good.
Never, ever.
But it's a process.
Lying, just so you know.
I know you are. Yeah, no, I know you are. But it's a whole process to get all of that done, and then I had to switch them all back. So that was tedious for me. That was infuriating for some of them. The other big problem that I am now running into, and that you guys are probably actually going to start running into, is that the credit card and banking systems are making some huge changes because of all the scammers out there on who they will underwrite and who they will not. So unless you are using a payment processor like Stripe or Square that uses a single bank with pool underwriting rather than individual account underwriting. A lot of IT companies that provide recurring revenue services like managed service plans, online backup, anything like that. Online backup specifically is mentioned, can't be underwritten by these credit card companies anymore. And in fact, I've had 3 separate merchant account that I've already had closed on me for that reason. I've been burned pretty badly with a 7-day notice of, hey, we're not going to do your credit cards anymore, so find somebody else. So big thing to look into is, especially with the type of work that we do, is how credit card companies, processors underwrite their accounts.
And I would tell you this, that's a good point you brought up. Here's the other thing that you can look at and probably should look at, and this is the one time that I will say you should read the whole thing. There's a thing called TOS, or terms of service, that you probably should look up for said company and figure out if you can parse through the information and figure out if it's going to work for what you're doing. See if you see any red flags in there before it gets to a point where, yeah, we thought they provided this, but they actually don't.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. For that one specifically, the bigger problem is them changing their terms of service after the fact. So when you're reading through those terms of service, find out what the requirements are for them to provide notice of changes.
That's good. John?
In the chat, Wiggs brings up, I asked if there were any horror stories, and he brought up the Avast AVG CCleaner sending out the infected software in CCleaner. So, I guess the point I bring up there is I had the same problems with QuickBooks Online. I've been using QuickBooks Online probably since its inception, and I have all my invoicing in there all automated to go at a certain date and create blah, blah, blah. Well, all of a sudden, QuickBooks Online started randomly sending my invoices at any particular date it wanted. So, QuickBooks support solution was, well, just delete all those and recreate them.
Right.
So, I think you're going to have some bumps in the road no matter what you use. Software's hard, we always say, but you have to be prepared for that no matter what you invest in.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Here's the thing. When it comes to, if you're using, and I don't know if I know CCleaner, most people don't pay for. Avast, AVG. I know a lot of technicians, and quite honestly, I don't think this is a good practice. Myself personally, we're putting on free antivirus.
Yeah.
You can stand on whatever ground you want. And I just think that if we're getting paid for our services and we're providing a service, a lot of people will go, well, it's better than nothing. Well, here's the thing. When it comes to things like that, when you are putting something on there that is going to pop up and nag the customer, and whether or not they had an infected file or not, everybody's subject to that, especially where we get these files from. And so if you look at that standpoint of, I put something free on there, now I'm bummed that I can't trust anybody. It's like, well, here's the difference. You are paying for a said software or using what's already in most of the systems since Windows 7. Well, Windows 7, you could add it in, but since Windows 8, you could have an antivirus that was actually running. The first thing I do with an antivirus that's on a system is I uninstall it from whatever OEM, whether it's McAfee, Norton, it doesn't matter. And I let Windows Defender do its thing because, again, you can go back and look in past episodes. Windows Defender is good enough, in my opinion. And so that works perfectly fine. But I never wanted to put a free product on there that was going to nag the customer. So I figured I'm going to use Microsoft's because they don't ever nag the customer because they're already there and they're using that operating system. And who knows their operating system better than Microsoft?
Well, let's swing this around to our show topic. I mean, I guess the end of your statement should be is if you're going to have a problem with the product you're using, do you have a vendor relationship to fall back on and somebody to support you if needed? So if you have you're limited in your Microsoft Windows Defender, and I don't particularly disagree with your comments either, but in what they're going to provide you, meaning you get what it is out of the box. That's what you're going to get, the basic protection, limited reporting, no real management of the product and all that sort of thing. No. And if there is a problem with the product, you're either going to, as us, nuke and pave your machine, figure out how to fix it, or if you're an end user, you're going to one of us or back to an OEM, wherever you got the machine from, for that support. So if you have a vendor relationship, you probably have a whole support channel and things going on like that. So, I guess that is the crux or the root of our conversation is what you're putting on your customers' machines. Are you going to be able to get help for that? Where's your vendor support for that?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same idea as, if you buy an OEM license of Windows to put onto a computer, buying that OEM license means that you don't have vendor support because you're dealing with the support yourself. So, using something like Windows Defender on a Dell computer, are you going to trust Dell? Do you have a relationship with Dell?
Right.
So thanks, John. That's a lot better than I could have put it, other than just Windows Defender sucks.
I'm really feeling good about it, the Canadian-United States relationship this week.
All I can tell you is it's colder up there than it is here.
I'm taking my finger off the red button, just so you know. It's off.
Are you? Oh, that's so nice.
Oh, all right. Is there anything else we can add to the conversation of things that people need to think about when they're thinking about getting a new vendor or trying somebody out?
I want to add one more thing. Wiggs in the chat brought up made another comment regarding the Avast AVG. And his point was, he says that the Avast AVG manufacturing and distributing the infected CCleaner absolutely rules them out forever, in his opinion. I guess I don't disagree with that, but my comment would be is that everybody makes a mistake once in a while.
Yeah.
My response to that would be, and I'm not an Avast or AVG partner, but it would have been, what was their response? I read the articles about that, but if I was an Avast or AVG partner and that happened to my customers, what is my vendor partner doing for me at that point? If they just drop the ball and leave me hanging to fix the solution, you bet, Wiggs, I'm totally out.
Yeah.
And I'm moving to somebody else in a heartbeat. But if they made a mistake, they own up to it and they're helping me make it better and are supportive and, maybe even in the end, make me look better, then I think you have a vendor that's worth keeping, even though they made a mistake.
For sure. Well, and I mean, really, how far into the corner are you going to paint yourself? If you kick out every vendor that makes a mistake that's big enough to make it into the news, you're only going to be dealing with startups, if there are any left.
Right. Okay. So I think we've probably gotten done with that topic, and I think we've covered it thoroughly and given everybody something to think about, even with Chris's rabbit trail. No, it was all good. It was all. I'm just messing with you. And no, these are things to think about, and stuff that needs to be that people need to answer for themselves. We're here to bring you the information to make sure you have enough information that you can go and look at yourself, look at your business, and make an informed decision. That's what it's all about. And it's like anything else, not everything is going to be for everybody. So I call this the grocery store method. When you walk in a grocery store, you can absolutely grab everything off of any shelf you want, throw it in your cart and buy it. But the point is, you're not going to grab everything off the shelf. You're just going to grab what you need for that week. Let's take another quick break, and we'll talk about our next subject, or we'll get into emails and whatnot. If you guys are getting something out of the show, guys and gals, if you're getting something out of the show, I would encourage you to go to patreon.com/computer repair podcast. And I want to thank one of our newest Patreon supporters, Dan Jones. Thank you, Dan. And I want to let you guys know, if you join the Facebook group, no matter what you give, basically, you will be invited, or actually you'll have to send me some information, but you will be able to come into our secret Facebook group. Now, we'll be able to not only talk about the subject of the show, but also be able to help with different things that you come across in your business. There's a lot of good information that's going back and forth in there. Chris is in there. John's in there. We have Paco LeBron's in there. And so there's a lot of good people, a lot of good information going back and forth that we can get and work and use in our businesses. So it's a win-win. So if you guys want to do that, that would be great. And we're looking forward to doing some other things down the road as far as giveaways and stuff like that once we get to a certain level. And you can go check it out over there. Like I said, patreon.com/computer repair podcast. Check it out. And if you feel like you want to, go ahead and do it. I encourage you. And I want to thank all of our Patreon supporters for your continued support. What you guys are doing is awesome, and we appreciate each and every one of you.
Hey, I'll add on to that, Jeff. I want to give a shout out because you and I were talking off air that a lot of the guys that have given to Patreon haven't given us their correct email address to get into the Facebook group. So, I mean, we got a lot of guys out there in the group, and it keeps getting better and better. So if you're not in the group and you want to be, and you gave some Patreon donation, make sure you reach out to Jeff to get him your correct email address ASAP. Right.
Yep. And I went through and I sent everybody all the people that weren't in the Facebook group, I sent them a message through Patreon. So, but I know a lot of people use different email addresses for stuff that's, they kind of want to keep separate from their personal stuff, which I understand. I get that. So anyways, that's why we kind of need some of the information to pull you into the Facebook group. But everybody did get a message sometime around last week. So if you're not getting those messages, I'm glad you brought that up, John. Definitely check your spam folder and see if it ended up in there. So, and like John said, if not, hey, just send an email to podnuts@podnuts.com and with your Facebook email, and I will go back and check the list and see if you're a Patreon supporter, and then put you right in. Takes like 2 seconds.
Family.
All right, let's answer some emails and take some calls. Phone lines are open. The call number is 1-888-697-0162. Now, we did have a caller that was on the line, and he got on earlier in the show, but he did leave his information, and this is Josh McClure. He is from Richmond, Virginia, your PC magician. And Josh has been on the show before. Question: Josh is trying to streamline his business and wants to know if you recommend that he uses G Suite for Business or Office 365.
Oh, peacetime's over.
Gloves are off.
Pushing button now.
Go ahead, John.
What are you doing now?
I mean, look, it's 6 one, half dozen another. I would suggest that you use the tools that you like to use the best. I'm going to simplify this statement. You can pretty much make either one of them do pretty much the exact same things. All right. If you're in the Google ecosystem, I might stick with the Google product just because you might get a little bit more integration. If you're a big Microsoft guy and you like the Microsoft products, that would probably direct you. I can't tell you if one's right or the other, to be honest with you. I am a G Suite guy. I have been for many years. I like G Suite. I have customers that use Office 365. I'm often sometimes intrigued by maybe switching sides just because there are some features, Google will do something and it's cool and Microsoft doesn't have it. And then Microsoft will do something, the shiny squirrel that we chase all the time. But I don't think anybody can honestly say, of course, there's outliers, that one is better than the other depending on your needs. Chris?
Yeah. I mean, because if you already have a system in place, especially, then that's where I'd be looking first. There are a lot of services that use the cloud functionality of either Office 365 or G Suite. But you're right, you can do just about everything in the one that you can in the other. So figure out which one works best for you, figure out which one works with the tools that you're already using, and see what's going to help your business. Because I use Office 365, but that doesn't mean it's the right thing for you.
And I think you brought up a great point, integrations. That might be something that guides you if you're torn between the two. Look at the applications you're using. Do they integrate with one or the other better or at all? It's a lot of the times it could be a product that you use as dependent. If you are a Microsoft Excel guy and you love Microsoft Excel and you're using multiple worksheets and tables and all that, you're probably not going to love Google Sheets because it is not as powerful. So, maybe that guides you to the Microsofts. There could be one thing that pulls you one way or another. So
it's a good point. Now, John, specifically, let's talk a little bit since we've got some time, let's talk a little bit. What things do you like about G Suite?
I like the simplicity of G Suite. In my opinion, it is much easier to use, configure, deploy than an Office 365 account. And I'm certainly not saying that Office 365, whether provided by Microsoft or a third-party vendor, is hard to deploy. But I mean, if someone is going full G Suite, all web-based applications, you have nothing to install on the clients, which, let's be realistic, doesn't happen all the time. Many offices still like to use the on-premise software. Some even like to integrate G Suite into Outlook. But, I've always been a Gmail guy. I've always used all the online products first, task management, Docs, Sheets, Drive, all of that. If I'm going to be honest on our topic today about vendors, I would say Microsoft and or third-party vendors like AppRiver are probably much better partners than Google is. And you also probably have a lot more opportunity as a Microsoft partner or third-party partner through AppRiver or somebody like that than you do with Google. I mean, I'm a Google authorized partner. I probably have 1,500 emails in my G Suite, individual addresses or more. I'd have to go back and count. I don't know. But the Google channel reseller channel friendliness is not really there. There's not a ton of money to be made on G Suite on a month-to-month basis. Not that you're going to get rich off Office 365 either. No. But in all honesty, partnering on the Microsoft side would probably be a better way if that's what you're looking for.
Actually, if I can weigh in on that.
Please.
Because I've done both.
Okay.
And I'm going to say that there is zero difference between them as far as support if you're going directly through Microsoft, through the CSP program. If you are going through your distributor for the CSP program, that becomes a completely different ballgame, and that's where you get your good support. Whether it be AppRiver for the US or Tech Data for Canada, there are plenty of options for you to do that, down to the point where that vendor will provide end user support if you want to have a 24-hour line for your customers to call in case they have an emergency with their email at 3 o'clock in the morning. So neither one of them are channel friendlier than the other unless you're on the Microsoft side and you're using a third-party CSP partner.
And let me say this before I ask you the other question, Chris. Talking about vetting a vendor, what I encourage everybody to do, and I can't remember exactly which episode it was, but if you guys go listen to Marvin B over at Podnuts Pro, he did a AppRiver interview with one of the gentlemen there. And for all the vendors that maybe listen to this show, or if anybody wants to give them this information, this is the show I would send all vendors to understand what it means to be a good vendor. Because listening to that show, even though I don't use AppRiver, I wanted to be a customer. I was ready to sign up right now because the way they talked, the things they provided, their whole outlook on how they do their business and what they're trying to do is absolutely, utterly amazing. And I don't say that lightly. Everybody knows I'm usually the curmudgeon. And in this particular case, I was sold on that particular vendor for those reasons I've just stated. Now, Chris, what are the things that you like about Office 365 since that's what you're using now?
Well, when it came to email, I used Outlook very early. Oh God, you are going to have a field day with this next statement. When it came to doing reports in the Unix environments that I had in the car manufacturing plant that I worked in, I have very, very heavily leaned on Excel to pull a lot of data from the plant servers to create spreadsheets and graphs for management. So I just really, really learned Excel and Outlook. And those two products kept me, yep, there it is. Those two products kept me on the Microsoft bandwagon. I did start off doing Google first when it came to the reselling for the email hosting. But I did wind up moving over to Microsoft because of the third-party CRM support. So again, it was when it comes to the software, I'm happier with Microsoft software. But when it comes to support, it is that third-party support that I'm looking for.
Listen, Chris, it's fine. I will never say that you're full of crap. I just look at you like you're full of crap. That's
yeah,
all.
I know. It loses translation when people are listening to it on iTunes.
Oh, anyways, no, that's good. No, and there is people are used to using one thing or another, usually because maybe that's the first thing they started using, or they maybe were using something and they switched over. So I'm in a weird, totally different, again, my Excel spreadsheet world. I love Outlook, like the product, and I get the professional whatever it is, whenever they update it, every 3 years, whatever. And so Outlook for me, I just like some of the features inside of Outlook. It helps me maintain my 7 email addresses very easily. Now, the thing is, for business side, most of my stuff is on back then it was Google Apps. Now it's G Suite. Most of my stuff is on the G Suite side, but I just put those email addresses into Outlook. Now, John looks at me funny all the time because he's like, well, why don't you just use webmail? I don't like webmail. I never have. And so for me, I like having Outlook as a product. Now, for a lot of people, I understand this is the bane of their existence because it breaks. People, they put way too many, or they keep way too many emails in there. They have their PST files, OSD, all that stuff is just humongous and it's ridiculous. Nobody gets rid of everything. I get rid of a lot of my stuff that I'm not using. Now, with that being said, what is cool about it is using something like G Suite where email is basically cloud-based. Anytime, now, I normally do not back up my own personal system when I go to reload it. And I don't do it as often as I used to do it every 6 months back in the day. Now it's lucky if it gets done every 4 years. I just let it run. Usually I'm building a new computer. That's usually when it happens. But if I have to do that, I do not even use my own products on my own system, which is kind of silly. I haven't used Fab's Auto Backup on my own personal stuff because I have everything backed up. And I'm just going to drag and drop it over, or it's on a separate drive or whatever. It doesn't really matter. My main stuff, operating system, is just a small drive and whatnot. But when it comes to Outlook, what's cool is it takes me like a very short amount of time to basically put my credentials back in there and basically go ahead and all my email that I have in my Gmail accounts, they're all there. Boom, they show up. No problem. So I use kind of a hybrid approach, a hybrid system, but again, it works for me. I like it. It's how my brain works. I have a new business venture. I will probably try a Office 365 and another G Suite account just to kind of do a checks and balances against them and see if there are really any differences. But I love both worlds. So I live in an Android-based world, but as far as a computer, I'm in a Microsoft world. And so that's kind of where I'm at. So for me, it makes sense to use either or as far as those products. All right. Hope that was a thorough explanation. We took a lot of time with that one. That was good. All right, here's our last email of the show. And if we have anything that's it's in the chat room, we can bring that up to you fellas. All right, this one comes from Jorge Hernandez. I haven't heard from him from 123computerrepair.com. It says, hi, Jeff. Just curious if you've ever used any of those $100 data recovery services. I have a client with a bad drive that I may need to send out. Let me know if you know any of these companies and if you can recommend one, please. Thanks, Jorge. Guys, have you ever used any of the data recovery services that are out there?
Well, I mean, data recovery, sure. $100 data recovery, no.
Well, you know what I mean. There's Drive Savers. There's $300 data recovery, which is not really $300, but whatever. So, in other words, you've got your big contenders where you're going to pay probably a minimum of $800. So when you say $100 data recovery, I think he's talking about some of the lower tier stuff from that standpoint that have been around for a while.
Gotcha. Well, John, who have you used?
I've used Drive Savers in the past. I've used, what is it, down in Texas? I believe it's Platinum Data Recovery. They were at CompTIA.
Okay.
So I've used them in the past. I have sent a drive to $300 data recovery, and it did come back with the data, but that's what the customer wanted to do. So,
okay.
But I can't say I recommend one over the other. I mean, if it's a complex recovery and I really need the data back and the customer is really pressing for that data, hopefully I'd never get to that point because I have good backups, but I would probably send it to Drive Savers, but that is certainly not going to be your cheapest alternative.
Yeah. And there's many people out there. You have Scott Moulton from My Hard Drive Died. He does data recovery all the time, forensic type data recovery also. You have
JD
Gilware.
JD brought up Gilware in the chat. Yep. So, yeah.
Gilware's Paco and I were talking about this the other day, and he basically brought Gilware up, and I said, yeah, I'd totally forgotten about them, but I've heard several techs actually send their stuff out and comes back fine.
Yeah, I think Paco's used them before with good luck.
Yep.
Yeah, I have too. And they're very channel friendly. Because when we're working with Gilware, and I don't know if any of the ones that John was talking about does this, we set up the service ticket with them. They give us a discount on the data recovery, and we bill the client. So it's a pretty nice transition for all of that. Everything's branded, so it looks like we're providing the work. Although I tell the customers anyway, but it's nice.
There you go. In talking about channel friendly, going back to our original topic, which this you brought up a good point, Chris. Chris. Wow. Anyways, one of the things which when you're vetting a vendor, this is my opinion. If they're not channel friendly, and here's what makes them channel friendly. Your customer can't go to them and get a better deal. Like that is a deal breaker for me. And that's fine. If you're a company and you sell a consumer end product, but you also have a channel, I hate these terms. You also have this way that you're basically using it in your business, okay? Then you have to look at it from the standpoint of they really should be they could be the same product, but you should absolutely get a better deal on that product and even be able to sell it for less than they can get it online themselves, because then it's a win-win. Then it makes sense for you to actually support that product because you know that company is going to support you. If they're not doing that, again, for me, that's a red flag. I'm not going to deal with that company because I've seen it way too many times where it's like my customer gets confused. They go and they renew themselves or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want that where I have control of it because I was the one that sold it for the company. So you know what? You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, and vice versa.
And I mean, there's two avenues that you can go down on that, right? There's the managed antivirus platforms, right, where everything's controlled through a single web-based platform. And then there are solutions like what MCSoft came up with, where if you create a custom landing page for the MCSoft product, they'll give you a custom installer so that all those links for renewals and all of that go to your website, not theirs. They don't advertise to the customer. I'm sure they're not the only ones that do it. It's just the only one that comes to mind right now.
Okay.
So, whoa. And somebody just turned the lights off.
Now you look like a cyborg.
There we go.
Blade Runner, baby. Blade Runner.
Blade Runner. There you go. Okay. All right. So I hopefully, and I also, there are people in the Podnuts group that have been on the shows before. We have one person that came to mind that I know that does this in the Virginia area is Alex Shamande. And I think his name of his company is Evescent. I think it's Evescent. And so you can go look that up and just type in the name over on podnuts.com, Alex Shamande, and it should come up with the episode that he was on Podnuts Daily. And he's actually been on a few of the live shows too, but I know he was really big into data recovery and recovery net stuff. So that there are people that we all know that maybe we don't think about. And so that was the information that I had sent out at that point.
Can you spell that last name, Jeff?
It's CHAMANDY.
Oh, I was trying to be smart. Never mind.
Good luck. All right. And wow, that's really weird, Chris. All right.
I'm sorry. I have no idea where the light switch is in this place either. So
don't worry about it.
We're done.
All right. Chris, while you are in the dark, go ahead and give us one parting thought and let people know where they can find you now.
Sure. So biggest parting thought is that you and your vendors are the face of your company. So you need to make sure that both you and your vendors are putting your best foot forward when you're dealing with your client.
Awesome.
All right. Now, if you want to get a hold of me, you can find me, Chris at Carruthers Computers, Chris at Carruthers-computers.com. You can give me a call, 888-496-2641. And just a quick shout out, if there are any technicians out there looking for some work in either Reedville, Virginia, or in Kilmarnock, Virginia, I want to hear from you.
Very cool. And John, give us one parting thought. Let people know where they can find you.
God bless Canada. www.mavengroup.net.
Awesome, man. All right, come join us live for the Computer Repair Podcast every Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern over at podnuts.com/Computer Repair Podcast Live. Big mouthful there. Join in on the conversation by calling in live and hanging out in the chat room where we answer questions and see what's going on as everybody's going back and forth. It's awesome. You can also send an email to podnuts@podnuts.com or leave a voicemail at 1-888-697-0162. We have audio available over at podnuts.com or subscribe using your favorite podcatcher. You can be notified when the show's live by subscribing to our YouTube channel, Computer Repair Podcast. I want to thank everyone for listening and subscribing to the show. We'll see you next time on the Computer Repair Podcast.